Okay, cool. Well, my name is Ahmed Baba, and first of all, thanks for inviting me here. It was, just randomly over Twitter, and I'm always happy to talk to people about what I do and what we do at Rantt. So, if you read some of our articles, we do journalism, and we're focused on disinformation and extremism. And my path to get here wasn't really like straightforward at all. I used to work in tech before this, back, in my earlier 20s, and I was like, and then essentially what happened was during like 2015 era, and once we saw a lot of disinformation and all this extremism running rampant on social media, I was like, I kind of got to do something about this, right? So Rantt first started as a social network, and originally we were just trying to get people talking, speaking their minds, etc. And then people started sharing like just outright fake news. I'm sure you all have seen just some of the wild things some of our grandparents share on Facebook, and they send to us, and just it's like, no, that's not true. And we were seeing all that going on, and then we thought, hey, let's start aggregating some news into the app. And then that's basically how I got into I didn't actually study journalism. I actually went to community college here in Virginia, and then I actually left college to pursue Rantt full time. And then essentially I didn't have necessarily even a journalism background when I first entered it. So a lot of the stuff I did was self-taught through aggregating just so much content, basically. And then through that, I learned a lot of the journalism that that we partake in through observing, practice, and just when I was saying we aggregated news, we were putting like 100 articles through the app a day, and then just really digesting what was going on. And then going into 2016, that was when we ended up just like, hey, let's start writing news ourselves. They're given, the way that they're covering the 2016 election isn't going well. We're seeing how this is going to end. And then that's when we launched Rantt as a media publication. And I was like, I was 21 when I started like pursuing this. So it was like 2014. So, we didn't even know what we were doing half the time. I'd say it took a long time to really, it's just one of those things where eventually, I know I'm not given a lot of, confidence in what we, it's just funny because we didn't know. Like it was wild, right? Like all of this stuff that was going on was so new to us. But over the course of the Trump presidency, by the end of it, we were pretty much experts, because we really just thought we had to be the ones to speak this truth. All of our other co-founders, fellow employees, were all in their 20s. We all wanted to give a youth perspective on this, and that's essentially just I tried to cram an entire decade into just like 2 minutes, but that's the gist of why we began what we did.
Wow, it's a great story, actually, and it shows how you don't always plan your path, and suddenly it unfolds in front of you. In some ways, the universe comes to meet you, right, in that way, and your story definitely reflects that.
So really, the guiding worldview, I'd say, is just given the situation that we're in, it's just my main goal is to try to figure out a way to, just come to places of common understanding, which I know is kind of impossible now because everyone exists in their own different realities, essentially, in their different bubbles. And I know we're all from different backgrounds and everyone has different opinions. But it's like trying to figure out a way to get us all back into like objective reality. I know it's just a super broad goal. It's not really something you can quantify, but I'd say that's, the broadest, that's the mission, right, of the whole thing. And that's why we started originally and why we still work on it today, is because we think if you keep telling the truth as ferociously as you can, and if you don't condescend to people who disagree with you, and if you try to bring people together around just the commonly agreed upon facts, then I think from there, if everyone respects each other's humanity, you can agree, hey, maybe we can move forward, you know, maybe. The way I kind of see it is, you know, I don't see it as like a specific demographic profile. It's more of a way of thinking. Like, I really think it's, because we also have like a community aspect to Rantt too. So it's not just the journalism. We have like when people, no other media company's done this to my knowledge, where if you subscribe, you get invited inside of a like community chat scenario where basically they engage with all of us all day and each other. Like, we become like a giant kind of friend groups, like all our subscribers and readers end up becoming, you know, one with us. And we're seeing is like, it's people from all ages. There's people in their 20s, there's people of all races, you know, genders, ideologies. We have some people, some conservatives that are in there too. So it's not even just liberals either. It's really just, I'd say the profile is just people who are kind of have that same worldview, right? I think that's really what it is. The way I see it is, people get more entrenched if you try to just attack them. You like, I kind of try to, you try to approach it on understanding, a little bit of love, and then asking, they will debunk it themselves if you ask enough questions. You're like, okay, so, you know, what are these, who manufactures these alleged space lasers? Do you have any proof for? And like, just ask like you're like genuinely curious about their point of view, and then they'll start to debunk it themselves. Like, people self-radicalize, and you have to figure out a way to get them to self-de-radicalize by like getting them to question their own assumptions. But like, what your point is on how they're bending news specifically to avoid, basically for corporate interests. It's about clicks, it's about ratings, it's about, you know, basically crisis sells, the pandemic's almost over, so now everyone talks about the border crisis. Like, that's like natural corporate media forces. But like, I think one of the problems with I wouldn't say bias is necessarily fake, because bias is in the eyes of the beholder too, right? So for example, back in the early Trump days, one of the reasons why Rantt rose in the first place and why we got our initial traction and large following was because at the time they were trying to create a false objectivity, where I think where you try to be objective to the point where you're acting like there's equal scandals on both sides. So like, Trump will lie and say, this party did that, this person did this, and then a Democrat will respond, and then they'll say, oh, well, both parties trade attacks, when one is a lie and one is not a lie, one is based on fact. You can't balance that, right? So that's also another form of bias, where it's like, New York Times does this all the time, where it's like a false balance. So there's so many levels to it.
In the class, we are living in apocalyptic times. We are living in times that, even if you don't believe that climate change or pandemics are caused by climate change, which it is, of course, but you sense it. It is in the collective consciousness right now. And people respond in very odd ways sometimes to an apocalypse, especially if they're not willing to admit that we are living. And I don't want to scare anyone. I try not to bring in too much that kind of conversation. I think it's transformative times, meaning I think we're going through something as a global humanity, as a collective, that will take us to a different place. But that is anxiety inducing. And when people are anxious, they respond in certain ways. And I think QAnon is one of those responses. I think it's something to cling to. I don't know if you have thoughts about that too.
No, that's an amazing point. I mean, I think transformative is definitely a better way to frame it, because I'm just an eternal optimist. And I think from here, we go up. I think this is all happening for a reason. I think, especially Trump, not that he ever did anything good in my view, but I think, you know, a lot of people woke up during this era, and a lot of people tuned in. But the problem with that is, like you said, the flip side. So last year, the reason why I think so much extremism has run rampant, I think you all have had those moments where, you know, a news event happens or something happens in which you're in this class, so you're already learning a lot about a lot of this, but like, you know, when you can't look away anymore from the news of the world, or something pulled you in to tune in, to do more research, to just look around and take more stock of things. Well, for a lot of people who have not been paying attention to the world around them, coronavirus was that moment. Coronavirus sat them down in their house. When I talk to former QAnon believers or extremists, they say first they got roped in with something that's a truth, and then they got, so I just wanted, yeah, I think you're right that it's the transformative times we're in, and especially the pandemic, that got people further down these rabbit holes. I have faith that once the openings begin and we're out engaging with people that don't look like us again and being humans and having lives, I think it'll go down a little bit. Hopefully.
I hope you're right about that. Like I said, I think it's here to stay, but maybe it won't quite be as attractive to more people the more that we can kind of get back to whatever normal looks like after this whole thing. I mean, and
now, because we need a more digital oriented fairness doctrine, and it shouldn't be even called the fairness doctrine, I don't think, because it's not about fairness, it's about accuracy. But of course, the question is who is the one who administers this? Because I actually do, this is where conservative argument is actually credible, where it's like that would be a slippery slope if the government, goes too far. Right now it's democratic government, right, that would say that, or FCC that would, put these regulations in place, but then how would it be misused in a future one, or where does it go? But I think there's some simple things that can be done. I mean, I think people are like OAN and Newsmax, there's no way that they should still have a license. I don't know. I don't understand how you can repeatedly lie like every day to the faces of your readers, get sued multiple times, and then just continue. So I think one thing you could do that takes it like out of the government's hands is like put a threshold where if there are enough successful defamation lawsuits and you lose your license, like that'll add a deterrent to like, so when people do get defamation lawsuits, they get more fearful and then will actually stick to the truth. So something like that, I think, enhancing the licensing requirements for broadcast orgs will help on that front. And then on the online front, which is where it's all really happening, this kind of regulation would actually probably have made it almost impossible for me to have started this in the first place. But something that's small business friendly that allows for a process to go in place where you have to get like kind of a license similar to a broadcast one, more easily accessible. But if you want to categorize yourself as news, you have to get one as an online publication. And then you get like some kind of certification so that when people read it online, they'll see this one is an actual licensed site. That would help with the disinformation that we see on social media. And then on social media itself, I mean, that is just, right now, they're testifying as we speak. Zuck is out there and Dorsey are out there on the Hill right now testifying about this information. And they I think maybe if they don't clean it up, there might need to be some certain tweaks to Section 230, just not to what the extent Trump was saying, but something that makes it so they have, like Facebook is the biggest media company in the world, whether they like it or not, and they need to take their role more seriously. So something there with 230 that makes, like, and again, I don't think it should be government that is the one dictating it. I think something along the lines of making penalties for certain suits. But again, Facebook can't get sued because they're protected under Section 230. So you might have to tweak it, or maybe we'll see. The social media one is really, really hard. But I do think when it comes like the news sites themselves and broadcasting licenses, I think those are like easier fixes.
I want to say I thank you for your courage. I think that you are opening yourself up to a lot of, and I think it came up, but there's a risk to what you're doing. I'm sure your DMs, and I'm sure you're getting threats and those kind of things. And we as the audience, as the public, I want to say thank you for doing that, for putting yourself on the line like that, in a very real kind of way. So I think you're brave, and I appreciate it.